call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Batman.
What up? Welcome back once again to the Necro Zoo. I am Bones.
Oh, it's huge. It's really huge.
And in this one, let's go ahead and add one more figure to my McFarlane DC Multiverse collection. Now today we will take a look at our second figure from the JLA Plastic Man wave. Now we first did take a look at Hook Hand Aquaman, a more 90s styled version of Arthur Curry. And today we will be taking a look at John Stewart. Now this is a more classic late 70s version of John Stewart. Now we have received a couple of versions of John Stewart before in the DC Multiverse line. Now this suit version being more akin to the textured McFarlane suits that we have seen in recent Lantern versions. Now he does look pretty tactical in the packaging, but let's go ahead and take a closer look at him. But first, he does come with your standard black DC Multiverse stand. Now, of course, these are not really needed, but sometimes they do come in useful. He also comes with his data file card. On the front, you do have an image from the comics. Very iconic, very early era feeling of John Stewart. Now here you don't know if he's helping Hal Jordan or if he just beat the brakes off of Hal Jordan, but it is a very awesome image nonetheless. Now on the back, you do have some information. Pretty sweet. We will hold on to this. Now, John Stewart, a more military-styled member of the Lantern Corps. They usually go to him to make a lot of tactical plans and maneuvers, and a lot of his constructs are more reminiscent of a militaristic style weapon. Now, we did not receive any alternate hands with this figure, which is kind of sad, but we did receive some energy. I want to say constructs, but these are more like energy effects. Now this one is a sort of swooping green emerald effect. I think this is from the Arkham Red Hood, but just done in a more emerald green crystallized version. But always cool to get a little bit of accessories. We'll hold on to that. And then you have this one, which is really nice. Goes on to the fist and kind of gives that lantern blast energy coming off of the ring style of effect. So this one's pretty cool. You can swap this out and use it with different figures. Maybe throw it on the old school Silver Age Hal Jordan. All of these parts are interchangeable and swappable. Pretty cool. We'll hold on to that. Now, the final thing you do receive with this figure is actually the legs of Plastic Man. Now, although I have been really busy in my, regular work, I really want to get through this through this wave of figures so that we can take a look at Plastic Man, which is a figure I'm really anticipating taking a look at. But we'll get there. Trust me, we'll get there in the next couple of days. But just your standard Plastic Man legs, we'll take a closer look at these when we actually take a look at that Plastic Man figure. So pretty cool. But let's go ahead and take a closer look at the actual John Stewart. Now, there is a big divide in the collectors right now, and that is that a lot of people want just your classic plain suited lanterns with no texture, sort of like pajamas, flying through space, which is fine. That is how they are represented a lot of the times in the comics. But in newer media and newer designs, they do seem to have a more space, sort of alien technology texture to their suit, which is something I can understand as being more realistic. Because, of course, flying through the, freezing temperatures and no atmospheres and pressures of space, you might want to have something a little bit more durable and rugged than your PJs. But I actually can take either version of the lanterns, clean, classic looks, or new textured suits, they will all go into my DC Multiverse collection. So this guy is very reminiscent of the newer lanterns we have seen. We will compare with some of the earlier versions. But as a John Stewart figure, he really gives off that classic comic vibe, which I really like. The head sculpt looks amazing, really taking you back into those times of a more grittier, kind of street version of John Stewart, although he is a former military member. But all in all, really love the look, love the physique that these figures actually have with this version of this body book. Definitely lean, but definitely packs on some muscle and not over exaggerated, as a lot of the times McFarlane's figure designs could jump right out of the comics and have a lot of exaggerated muscles and proportions that actually work in the comics, but not so much in the figures in hand. So I love this body book, love the design. Of course, there are going to be some negatives from this figure, but it is basically your $20 McFarlane figure, so there is a little bit of tolerance that you could have with some of the negative things while really enjoying the positives of this figure. Now, taking a closer look at the head sculpt, really not a complete dive into that early version of John Stewart because the hair is toned down a little bit, but it still stays true to that early version of John Stewart. Now, John Stewart came around in a later time in the DC Comics lore, so you're not going to see him in the silver or golden age version. You'll see him more in a modern times version of the times that this character was actually introduced into DC's universe. But pretty amazing head sculpt. Now the head is slightly smaller than other John Stewart heads, so we'll get into that later on with some different alternate heads. But it is a great looking John Stewart head sculpt. By far one of the better ones that McFarlane has done. Now taking a look at the articulation, you can look down really well. And I did notice that this head sits a little bit high, which is really more preferable for the range of articulation you will get in a head. Now he also looks up extremely well, and this is with no modding, but that is basically due to the head sitting higher on the figure, which is that extended peg. Really appreciated that way we don't need to, extend the pegs ourselves. You of course have right to left, and you can tilt his head for some attitude, which John Stewart is definitely known for. Now going down, we're going to start off with a negative here, but it's not a big deal. And that is the emblem on the chest. Now, a lot of people don't mind painted on emblems. A lot of people actually adore sculpted emblems. It just takes a figure more into a modern era than that, same reused painted on emblem that a lot of companies have used before. But my only gripe with this emblem is that since it is on this textured body, you sort of get the emblem in a sort of textured version, which I'm not a big fan of. In fact, although I do love the body, I really wish they would have used a sculpted emblem and just sort of fitted it onto the chest, a la the original version of John Stewart, while keeping the rest of the body in this nice beaded texture that they have designed for the lanterns. Now, I won't go too much into articulation because, of course, we have seen this before, but some really smooth and wide range waist articulation that actually a lot of companies are starting to do. And although they could say that it's because of, Jada Toys or any other line seen in mass market, McFarlane has been doing this for a couple of years already with the double ball joint at the waist and at the lower chest, giving the figures great range and smooth articulation. On the shoulder, you got the same socket bushing and shoulder disc joint, giving you a lot of movement, which is always appreciated. Now, On the left hand, you do have a gripping hand, and this is kind of a little bit annoying because, of course, this John Stewart comes with no lantern battery, so there's nothing for him to hold unless you wanted him to hold some sort of military pistol construct, which we do not have. So, although annoying, it's not a big negative, but it is pretty sad that I would have to fix that myself, which we'll take a look at later on in the video. Now you can bring out lanterns that we have received before. I have this old lantern battery, not even really sure what that one is from, but it fits perfectly with this figure. So it's not a big deal killer when you can always reach back into your accessories and give him a lantern. This one actually looks really good. Now on the other side, you do have the classic fist with the lantern ring, which is awesome, looks really good, and fits this figure rather perfectly. Going down into the lower body, just your basic lantern suit. You do got that beaded texture. The boots are really nice, and the whole figure cuts a really nice superhero silhouette. And what I mean by that is that you do not have any big gaps around the waist. You do not have any big, horrible gaps around the crotch, which you see in a lot of lines, even still to this day, which really annoy me, which is why I actually prefer the trunks that McFarlane uses, because it gives you the clean lines without any giant, ugly gaps. Down into the boots, which are really sleek, and the sculpted ankle joints would give it even more of a costume hero feel. Now at the bottom, you just have some identifying marks. Moving up the back, you got some John Stewart butt there. And another thing people were pointing out online, and that is the back of the costume is not painted. Now if you look up reference images for the back of the costume, the green is actually supposed to connect from the upper to the lower back. You got that full green sweep, which of course is missing on the back of this figure. Now, once again, not a big deal breaker. I mean, if you're not a big comic book aficionado or character, design specialist, you're not even going to notice it. But to us that do notice the details, it is missing. Now, it would be kind of hard to add this paint. You're going to have to make a mixture to get a certain green to tie into the already applicated paint. I may try and do that, but I kind of feel like it's not such a big deal that I really, want to get into that. But I could do it on a whim just to make the figure look completely accurate. Just remember, you will have to match the paint to give it sort of a satin finish with a little bit of gloss, but not too glossy and not too matte as well. But I am really happy with this figure. Now, of course, as I said, you can add an effect to him. You can add this ring effect, pose him out, looks really good. You can pretty much put this guy in a classic superhero team setup because this is a more earlier version of John Stewart. And the good thing about having different versions of characters is it opens up the teams that you could build, the leagues that you could build, and really makes collecting a whole lot funner. One thing I did want to tackle is that gripping hand. Now, as I said, you can put a lantern battery in his hand and it's fine. But I just really got annoyed with that, and I had to go ahead and fashion him a left-handed fist. Now, this was originally a red fist. I did primer it, put 2 coats of my favorite plastic spray on it, and still after that I let that dry, and I added a mixture of gloss and matte acrylic white to make a more satin white version, and that really fills the character out completely. Now I will go ahead and add this fist on here. And while once again I will state this is a $20 figure, so I mean, although annoying, it's not a big deal. But McFarlane really, since there was no lantern battery, it really would have been preferable, if not giving an alternate fist, just give him the fist to come with. And it just really makes this John Stewart character. he really feels a lot better, a lot more at home with having two fists. So I would really prefer that instead of the gripping hand that he gave us. Now, there is also the alternate side of this, and that is that if you want to go with some of the older constructs that we have been given, the gripping hand actually works a lot better. You could use that Gatling gun construct that came with the original Jon Stewart and take some awesome photos of this version. Now, speaking of that, let's go ahead and look at some of the older releases. Now, we do have the original Jon Stewart version, which is really stylized, really has a lot of design. And although I do love the head sculpt, it's just another alternate version of Jon Stewart. Now, of course, this was actually made to match up with our original Hal Jordan release, which another figure I love, although you do have to shorten the arms and modify him because they were a little bit crazy. I may be doing a little quick custom video coming up here soon, and I will show how to shorten the arms on this Jon Stewart. So if anybody wants to shorten the arms on the Hal Jordan, I'll put that video up here pretty soon. And then we get into the textured suits that were, that are being released by McFarlane. You do have this original Kyle Rayner. This is where we first kind of started seeing these textured Lantern Corps versions. Now, although a lot of people say that this same body has been used a lot of times, it's not necessarily true because, of course, you have the other Kyle Rayner, the more 90s version, but his wrist gauntlets and his boots are completely different. Opening up the versions of lanterns than you could actually make. And we also have the awesome Sinestro that was released. And this is another time where people say, oh, he's just using the same body. The Sinestro and the Kyle Rayner are the same body. Well, actually, that's not true, although some parts are the same. The whole upper body and trunks of this version are completely different, having more stylized piping lines, and actually something I really would have enjoyed a lot more for this Jon Stewart, and that is that the symbol on the Sinestro is sculpted out a little bit more and isn't just printed onto the texture of the chest the way this Jon Stewart is. I also extended the neck peg from this Sinestro because it just makes him look a little bit more alien and he looks taller, and to accommodate for the bulkier collar, which really is different than the Kyle Rayner version. If you look at this Sinestro collar, it is a completely different sculpt. So although all of these bodies have the same texture, they have enough differences to make them their complete own version of each character. And I really love these versions of the lanterns. Kind of hoping we'll get one for Hal Jordan. That way we can actually have 3 different versions of Hal Jordan to use in our collections. Now, as far as alternate heads and looks go, I did notice that this Jon Stewart head is a little bit smaller than the original version. Now, you can put it on this body, and it does have its own cool look, but it's definitely not going to be for everyone. But something I did find that I really enjoyed, and that was that this power ring from the Prime Syndicate wave, his head fits a little bit better on this Jon Stewart body, and it just gives it a whole different look. Now, you could match up the neck paint a little bit better and paint the domino mask to match the green. And this is an awesome looking, not necessarily Jon Stewart, but a lantern. He just looks really cool and has a awesome vibe to him, which I kind of want to make a custom and keep this version as a permanent fixture in my collection. So anyways, guys, that is your Jon Stewart from the Plastic Man wave. I'll try and get into the next figure pretty soon. That way we can knock this out and finally take a look at that Plastic Man. But for right now, you guys keep hunting out there, keep collecting, keep customizing, and I will see you on the next one.
They used to call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Fat Man.